I think I come with a lot of expectations. That is, of course, we want to share our knowledge, our ideas. We want to listen, we want to learn.
What I expect of these young delegates is that they role model it. They role model the pluralistic approach to interaction at the session and beyond.
Starting point of any violent activity is basic stereotyping and extremism and generalizations.
Education was a part of the problem. School reinforced or strengthened my biases and prejudices regarding other communities.
Education is the greatest tool to counter violence and extremism.
How we engage with students and how we encourage our teachers to engage with students.
Violence for me is a form of communication. Most of the people think that violence is when you cannot communicate, but actually it's a form of communication when voice cannot be heard. So people use violence when they cannot express who they are.
It's not poverty. If it's poverty, the guy which is in the militia or which is insurgent, he cannot find food for his dinner or lunch. How can he find a weapon which is more expensive than that?
To be a terrorist, you need to have an ideology. Without ideology, you don't become a terrorist.
5 minutes after we are born, it is some other people decide for us who we are, our sect, our religion, our nationality, and we spend the rest of our lives defending it.
What is the distinction between a terrorist and a freedom fighter? Was Gandhi a terrorist?
I also believe in a peaceful tackle of violence, because you cannot defeat any ideology with bomb, with artilleries, or with gun. You can only defeat ideologies with heart.
Again, the fact that young people were given a platform to speak during the TAGe session, that was a great highlight for me.
Start asking questions. Deconstruct the message and then reconstruct it.
All right, friends, colleagues, well, that's TAGe. It's a forum that was designed at MGIEP to have no hierarchy, flat podiums, no speeches, which means I'm going to shut my mouth very quickly, and I'm going to pass it on to Stefan and Jan to take over the moderation. It's supposed to be provocative. I really plead to the young people to challenge, have their voices heard, because we have heard again and again over the last 2 days where are the young voices. And so this is the forum for you to make your voices heard and make your discomforts and displeasure with the community at large. Right.
Alors maintenant, Yann, tu vas prendre un petit...
So now, Jan, you can take the floor a little. Well, Stefan, I'll let you introduce him. So here we are. Today, there are two of us acting as moderators for this discussion. Stefan, talk to us about yourself. Well, I'm co-director of the Observatory on Radicalization and Extreme Violence and a specialist in radicalization and terrorism affairs. The rest is unimportant. My name is Jan England. I am a producer, an actor, and highly involved with youth in secondary since I was 8 years old, since quite a while actually. And today I'm going to explain to you how things will work for all the panelists and youth participants and all the people here in the room. It's very simple. The goal is to encourage discussion, to encourage questioning. There are lots of elements that came up in the past 2 days in the presentations, and people are saying, okay, well, where's the place for young people? I want to be able to speak out. I have things to say. So now is the time. It's time to discuss with the panelists as well as with the young people. The way it's going to work, we're going to be very strict on this. Stéphane and myself will be pitiless. Each time you have 1.5 minutes, not more than that. We're going to time it. We'll give you a question. You don't have to run away right away. And you will have 1 minute 30 seconds to answer the question. And then after that, you will be able to, well, we'll start with young people. I'll launch a question, and as soon as the first person wants to speak out, raise your hand, take the microphone, talk, say what you've got to say, and then in 1.5 minutes, we'll have to cut you off a little. In fact, we'll have to cut you off. And then after that, we'll move ahead to give the floor to one of the panelists. I would encourage the panelists to come forward to answer the question. All this is very informal, and they'll answer the question and maybe pick up on what they say. And you also will have just 1.5 minutes. So you have to be brief and to the point, very important. However, keep in mind that you have as many 1.5 minutes as you want. In other words, you can come back afterwards and speak again for a minute and a half and ask questions. The whole goal of this is really by means of questions that you have to build up a discussion, not necessarily to discuss everything you've experienced, because you only have 1.5 minutes. So each time you have to be brief and concise, but the only thing I would ask you to do, everyone, is that once you take the floor, and it's the first time that you take the floor, please introduce yourself, first name, last name, where you're from, and in 5 seconds, what you do in life. Could be student or specialist in such and such, as Stéphane just did, and really be brief. And then to really have the most discussion possible, you can also write in the room. If you have any questions, we're going to often answer questions that appear on the tweets. So your questions will appear. You know how Twitter works. So you type in on Twitter and you use the different hashtags that appear there, which are on the screen, on both screens. And then we will have times when we'll turn to your questions and we will relaunch them in order to have a debate. It's to encourage discussions so everyone can express themselves at the same level, not necessarily about your experiences, but about what you would like to do or what you think about this or that. All right for everyone? All right, number one. Stéphane, are you going to do the first question? Yes, I'll do the first question for the young people. We always start with the young people, and afterwards we'll turn the ball over to our specialists. The young people, there was a first question with Jan we looked at, and we said we should get to the heart of the matter. So according to you, in your opinion, does Internet have a true role in radicalization of youth? It's a general question, but a fairly precise question. And I see someone who's nodding already. So someone from the young people, would you like to take the floor? Who would like the microphone first? Please raise your hand. Okay, go ahead, take the microphone. Yes, André Blondel. So in answer to the question of whether Internet has a role to play in radicalization, I say yes, to the extent that through this network, it is a means that enables people to radicalize and for terrorist networks to develop a certain clientele that can try by various means to attract and to lure people, and developed by marketing methods. According to that aspect, I think that Internet can give rise to radicalization because it fosters cohesion between the various people, and there's no borders, so it's possible to radicalize young people wherever they are geographically speaking and whatever they do. So that's what I think. So I think we can turn this over now to expert here. The microphone is not working. Sorry. Mobin Czech.
Ex-extremist, became an intelligence undercover operative, now a PhD student in psychology. I want to just add, there is almost no such thing as internet-only radicalization. The radicalization occurs with human networks. So the internet is only a forum which human networks use, but the root of it is in human networks.
Oui, tout à fait. C'était très bon, merci beaucoup. Oui.
Right, very good, thank you. Okay, now we'll go ahead with another young person.
Attends, Stéphane, il y a quelqu'un juste ici. Ouais.
Stéphane, there's someone right here.
I didn't think I was that young. Anyway.
Yes, you are. Of course you are.
Okay, I'm Christina Archetti, based at the University of Oslo. I'm an expert in political communication and I do research on media extremism and radicalization. And I totally agree with our colleague here. So there is no such thing as online radicalization. And also the internet is only a tool, yes, that allows people to connect together. But then if we want to blame internet, then we have to blame cheap travel, for example, cheap flights. We should blame the EU for allowing people to travel across border freely. So there are, internet is part of a package of a free society. So we cannot blame just the internet. That's just a tool. But as he said, the problems of radicalization are in society. We should be focusing not on the technology, but on the motives why young people are attracted towards certain messages and certain ideologies.
Alors nos jeunes, justement.
So, our young people, do we have a response on that? And talk to us about your experience, or we wanted to come from you on that topic. Talk to us about hatred or your experiences relating to internet. Fine. I'm 19. I'm a young Quebecer from the Muslim community. Actually, regarding internet, I find that internet, as has often been said during these conferences, is a vector. It is not a reason for radicalization. It doesn't start from there, but in my opinion, it is a tool that can be used. And I compare it personally with a dictionary during a French class. We use the dictionary a lot, but the dictionary is not what does the work for us, actually. There you go. Thank you. Thank you. Are you going to go ahead, Stéphane? All right, I see someone just over here who has a comment. Let's go. The microphone is for you. So, on this topic, I think that the emphasis being placed in this conference, and can you hear me? Okay. So, in conferences and by governments on radicalization by internet, it makes it possible for the government to focus on the symptoms of radicalization without trying to analyze the causes, which are social and structural causes. And that is what disappointed me overall in considering how global the conference is, that the structure was never really looked at, or the inequalities and racism, which are the factors that lead to radicalization. And they tried to focus only on symptomatic causes by targeting individuals rather than see how institutions can question themselves and propose changes. Okay, are you going to talk to us about what was just said? And do you think that we experience racism or something particular in the internet that we don't experience on a day-to-day basis? Well, in response to that, racism and inequality really are experienced on a day-to-day basis, not on the internet. That's not where it's created. It's really in day-to-day life, on the subway, in schools, in universities, on the street, but actually a lot out in the street and in public places. So I think that internet is in fact an instrument where there's a lot of radicalization that is done, because by the strength of this tool and by the strength of the images and the strength of the irresponsibility that people have in front of a screen. But the solutions are, in fact, if we ask the right questions, not just the symptoms but the causes, and I think we can find solutions off internet, I think. Testing, is it working? Here. Julie Miville-Deschênes. So a representative of Quebec at UNESCO, Julie Miville-Deschênes. I don't think that we need to minimize that much the role of the internet, because in all research that I've read, it refers to the fact they don't describe it only as a vector, but as an accelerator. So being an accelerator, the internet is an accelerator, according to the research, in order to achieve radicalization toward violence. So this means that there is an effect. that everything doesn't happen before. It's true that there's a lot of factors that play in terms of radicalization that are not all the same, but once you get on the internet, that there's something there that happens or that accelerates the process and that can lead to violence, and perhaps then without the internet, I know that there's plenty of research yet to be done, but we would not be able to arrive so quickly at violence or at that idea of people leaving for Syria. So we shouldn't minimize the role of the internet while at the same time placing it in context. And I think I've used more than my minute and a half. All right, so a response from a young person.
From Burkina Faso, but I'm the executive chairperson of the African Youth Commission, which is the youthful version of the African Union Commission. Je voudrais rassurer, et je suis véritablement d'accord avec la madame qui vient.
I agree with the woman who just spoke. It's an accelerator because you have to keep in mind that internet and what happens on the internet, the most important thing is the content. And in the content, it's actors who place content in there. So it's what they put on the internet that they believe. It's what they believe is what they put on the internet. So it's a reflection of society. So if there are risks of vulnerability within the society, then it's going to end up on society. And as it is a very fast medium of huge accessibility, it goes viral and it expands in volume. But we have to reassure ourselves we're not neglecting the role of internet, but it necessarily starts within society before it ends up out in the internet and ends up taking shape. Yes, we talked about that. There was a response over here, Latifa Ziaten, who wanted to speak on this subject. Okay, please speak in the microphone. My name is Maziaten. I created a society for youth, and I'm a victim, and I followed the course of Mohamed Marah, and young people are left in a vacuum when they have not completed their day. They can be in front of the internet, and the internet completes it. But it's impossible for a young person today. If we look at the prisons or in the schools or in the neighborhoods, you see the sensitivity of these young people and the fragility of them and a lack of love and of supervision. And this is what happens. They have the school, sports, music, and recreation. If we had all that, then maybe we wouldn't have this vacuum that young people fall into where they go to the internet. Thank you. Right over here. Hello, my name is Saraya. I would like to support the agreement of Abu Bakr to the effect that the internet is indeed to reinforce and complete a person's ideology. And first of all, it's society, because a person who feels rejected by society to the point where they have trouble finding a job, and then whether it's a man who has a beard and can't go and work in a restaurant or whatever, the fact that they don't feel at home even here, whereas I'm a Moroccan origin, if I go there, they say I'm a tourist, and when I come here, oh, you're a Muslim, you're foreign, you're not at home. So at 14 years old, I'm not at home. So it confirms your ideology. It's not the only reason, because it's a society that plays a big impact. The society has to have a role in saying to young people, you are at home, we don't have any prejudice, stay here. But we don't have that support. And it starts with, I would start by thanking the Centre and UNESCO and all of the organizations and associations which work towards making us feel at home here in Quebec. Yes, absolutely. What I understand also is that what you're saying is that actually perhaps we could possibly use the internet, because internet has a good side to it. It has a side which in theory unites us through the social media, Twitter, Instagram. We see photos of people who are in this or that country, in Australia or whatever, and we can learn about their reality. So do you think that there might be a possibility of using that? Let's talk about the positive side of internet in order to perhaps sensitize people about the acceptance of many people, because I know that it's seems a little bit idealistic, but I don't know. Go ahead.
I think that one of the things we heard about this morning was the idea of multiple identities and the difficulty of reconciling multiple identities and cognitive dissidence in a way that doesn't lead to violence. And we were talking about that as an individual goal, but I think that we also need to have communities that can do that can reconcile multiple facets of identity, both in individuals and in groups. And the internet, I do think, is a place where that happens. It doesn't always happen peacefully or positively, but that is something that you see happening online that you don't always see happening in culture. So I think that if we can bring some of that offline, I think that could be a positive effect.
We'll go to panelist. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I wanted to say in relation to the comment that was made earlier. I'm not saying that the internet doesn't play a role. So putting the role of the internet into perspective doesn't mean it doesn't play a role at all. But what the internet does is enabling the establishment of relationships. So if there is an acceleration, it's the result of the establishment of a relationship, which might happen online, it might happen offline, and in fact outside the West there are many places where there is no access to the internet. Radicalization happens anyway. Radicalization has happened in the past, even before new media or the internet existed. So I think we should place our attention on that, the establishment of relationship. And I think it's also wrong to see this divide between online and offline, as if online there was this magical world where different things happen. At the end, it's all social space. And we don't, in our everyday life, we don't perceive this difference between online and offline. We talk on the phone, we go on the internet, we watch the news, we just live in a space, so in a social space, so we should be approaching it this way.
Thank you. On a quelqu'un d'autre? Ouais.
Hello. Okay. Yeah. My name is Vinny Lohan. I'm from New Zealand. My team and I are working on the next generation of tools for communication online. And if you really look at the internet today, there's a huge diffusion of responsibility because you can hide behind different identities, you know. And there is also a drowning out of the voice of the individual by the masses. Your voice can get lost in hundreds of comments. You know, discussion is very hard. So I really do think there's a huge role technology has to play in giving the tools which are required to facilitate conversation online, which are ancient. You know, there are still comments, one after another, after another. After a little while, you can't make sense of any discussion. You can't join in. You can't understand what people are saying unless you were there from the beginning. So I think the technology is lagging very far behind. So this, hopefully soon, our work and some other people's work as well, I'm hoping will lead to better conversations, but it's still not there yet as a technology point of view.
I wanted to mention something. We talk a lot about, yes, respect in society, that everything is not... You know, we wouldn't tell somebody, I hate you, right in their face. We don't dare go to tell them in the face. On internet, on social media, we can say, I hate you, and there's almost no impact. You know, we feel better. The person who says what she feels an important impact, it's as if this person had been told face to face. So all this discourse of hate, which doesn't exist, well, yes, it's present in society, but people on the internet allow themselves to behave differently. This way, well, what do you think? Do you think there's be a way? Because in society, I wouldn't just walk up to somebody and say, I hate them, we don't dare. But on the internet, this allows it. Shouldn't we find a way to perhaps solve or find a way to stop such hateful messages? The lady over there. Good evening, Maïs. I'm part of the movement Stop Hate. As you've noticed, internet is a support which has existed, you know, fairly recently in our societies. And actually, the real problem for hateful discourse is there's no education in school, or even from the parents, to how it works. What are the risks? How can we have your identity online, that is respect others? There's workshops that exist, but we have to promote this, to educate people, to explain to them how it works, why, when you put a comment which for us is something which is funny, it can have an impact on others, and it's really by explaining with youngsters, but also with parents, that we can solve this problem anyway, at least improve the people's lives. Thank you, Danielle.
Lant. I am a former extremist, a social worker in BC, and currently a law student. So my input on this is that regulation is important with the internet, and I believe that, like was stated in regards to basic relationships, and that's where radicalization happens, and the vehicle becomes the internet and reaches individuals who can take another form of identity if they're lacking social inclusion in their everyday space. And if we don't regulate to degrees on what is stated in the hatred online, then we're failing. And an example of this is with Section 13 from the Canada Human Rights Code, the Act that was repealed in 2013, and now individuals don't have any course of action other than engaging in the opposite narrative now.
Thank you. Stéphane, alors ça c'est vraiment intéressant.
That's really interesting, Danielle. And we'll go back to youth. So we've understood this need to educate. It's true that it's an extremely important need because everything we invest in education is saved in repression. But if we don't educate, since we're at the beginning, if it's long to do, if it's a long process, do you think that we have to find solutions to implement systems which will repress or which will block the hateful messages or which will allow to, as Danielle said, to find solutions to this speech in a more repressive way? Yesterday, there was a panelist who said, should we control? Is it possible to control the content of the internet? And he asked the question. I think he's in Boca. He's French. And he asked the following question. Can we control the content of the internet? Should we control the content of radicalization on the internet? And if we can, and we should, and why don't we do it? And what is it? It's in the name of freedom of expression. So there's a problem, therefore. At the same time that we say that internet gives the opportunity of expressing ourselves, people express themselves. So if there are difficulties to educate in society and that there's a difficulty of controlling the content of internet, it means that there's a problem. And perhaps Mr. Rojas, the youth, could tell us, because we suppress content on YouTube and it comes back, we suppress it comes back. What do? The question, we'll go to an adult. Oh, we'll go on to an adult. We'll go to a panelist, sorry.
Please, kids, hold on a sec. Oh my God. On va aller à un panéliste, s'il vous plaît.
We'll go to panelists, please. I'm not a panelist. I'm part of the group called Stop Hate. So I would like to answer to the question of the regulation of the hateful messages. I think that even though we add lots of regulation, we won't be able to prevent the person from thinking hateful messages. So what we need to do is do dialogue, talk with the person to understand why do they spread this hate message, to understand their fears, and based from their fears, try to deconstruct this whole hateful discourse. Well, concerning this small question I'm throwing out, in the everyday life, if we tell somebody, I hate you, I'll come back with this example, I hate you. The first time the person might say, okay, and we'll just stop and we won't talk about it again. But if we repeat the same thing every day to this person, it becomes harassment, it becomes intimidation, so we have to take an action. On social media, the I hate you, something like that, which can perpetuate constantly. We won't be able to tell the person, well, why do you do this, why do you say that? Because they're hidden behind. So what can we do? What do you think about it? Oh, sorry, I had promised to chat over here. Go ahead. Sini Kremi, student at Collège Montmorency and spokesperson on the forum on the radicalization and extremism. To come back to the comments that have been made on the hateful messages, we have to understand that there are laws. When there's a deliberate call to hatred, it's easy to repress these people. What's complicated is people who have hateful messages often are able to work around the laws insofar as through the lines of what they present, we understand the message they want to say, even though in court we won't be able to prove that they've deliberately given a hateful message. People in the community where they live feel this hate, they feel this hateful message, and so the legal framework has trouble repressing this type of message because, for the reason I was explained, for freedom of expression. So I think that the struggle which should be led in two ways. First of all, concerning the offline, the reality, the everyday life. It's really on the social inclusion that we have to deal with, inclusion of people so that they'll be able to participate in society fully, whether it's in the labor force or in any other sphere of society. Now, concerning internet, it's really, in my opinion, the critical sense and education, because there will always be messages which will be, it's kind of encrypted. We won't be able to prove that they're hateful, but they still will be hateful. So people need to be able to react to such encoded messages. Very interesting. I have to remind the principle of TAGe is one youth, one specialist. So I know that. Well, do we have a specialist who wants to intervene on the topic? Yes, Daniel. Oh, Vivek. Daniel. Next time. Vivek Venkatesh, education and cinema professor.
And if we're going to ask the questions around the internet and focus on the internet, with due respect to the conference and its title, we're looking at a very human problem. And if you think that you can ban hate speech through a media, you seriously need to relook and rethink your options. Hate speech has existed ever since we've learned how to think, right? And just because hate speech is propagated, accelerated, that it's multiplied by various factors on the internet, and we feel that we need to take a sense of responsibility with it, doesn't mean that we can begin to censor it. I think the biggest mistake we can make is drive hateful people underground. And that's something we need to consider very clearly. The other thing we tend to do here in the West is we tend to want to arrive at a consensus very quickly. Stop doing that. Agree to disagree. But please don't agree to come up with one solution to a problem. And if you can continue to have these conversations and continue to listen to one another's differing perspectives instead of sitting in an echo chamber and saying, I agree with you, then you're probably going to learn a lot more about what values we want to uphold, right? So you may not have to agree with me on this, but let's not find a consensus.
Alors, qu'est-ce qu'on fait?
So what do we do?
Qu'est-ce qu'on fait? Et je dirais ceci.
Simple question, what do we do? Is there a solution? What can we do? We'll go with the youth, yes. Over there, yes. We'll go with the lady. Yes, Noémie Métayer. I'm the colleague of Cédric in the Forum on Radicalization and Violent Extremism. We were spokesperson. I'm a student at Montmorency College. So I just wanted to add concerning censorship. You've discussed this earlier on. Another danger would be, if I'm not very aware of the internet and all this stuff, but if we establish a certain algorithm which would censor all the words concerning jihad and radicalization and so on, it would censor in the same stroke all the not hateful messages. I want to talk about it because it's very important to talk about these things. If we censor the hateful speech, we also censor those who want to denounce them, or simply those who want to be informed. We should not, police should not attack itself to a person who will go see a jihadist website to be more informed, to see the realities that are surrounding us, because it's important to open ourselves on the world, to be able to then do something. So, it would be alienate freedom of expression. We have to be careful. It's very interesting. There are possibilities. Internet companies like Twitter or Facebook have the capacity to block certain hateful messages or certain calls to hatred, or the use of certain images that we know they are images of propaganda. This remains a question. So finally, I'll look at one of the experts, perhaps Danielle, but I'll specify my point of view. It's do you think that internet companies, Twitter, Facebook, Google, is Ross here? He's supposed to be part of the panel. Okay, do you think that these companies are doing enough in this domain? We don't just talk about blocking, also working long-term to do the filtering and to make this universe more healthy and sometimes less aggressive. Do you want to intervene, Danielle?
Yes, thank you. In regards to my earlier comment on regulation and the follow-up question or answers, which I collectively agree with everything that's been said. I think it's important to note that the conversations that happen online become normalized. If we don't have regulation on particular degrees of the hatred, and we allow people to state anything and everything, it soon turns into the promotion of genocide. It soon turns into the promotion of murder. And putting limits on and restrictions doesn't stop the hatred, nor does it resolve the problem. However, we don't want the normal to be the promotion of genocide. I think that the normal should be that we have the dialogue and have some degree of restriction and limitation to speech, so the normal isn't genocide.
Merci. I was talking to I don't know if she is here, from the Institute of Strategic Dialogue, and she's worked a lot on this field, and she said something which really was very powerful. You know, she said that people who were at the early stages of radicalization of hate speech, you know, somebody reached out to them. They had this group who reached out to these people on Facebook. 69% of them replied to that conversation. That's a huge number. 69%, but that only happened because there was a one-to-one human bond. It wasn't an organization, Twitter and Facebook, saying, no, you can't do this. There was a human being who reached out to them and had a conversation with them, and you cannot take that away. Suppression, all of this, these are the final tools, but nothing can replace that human connection to that person who's at that stage who needs to be talked to.
Pat Dolan, UNESCO Chair for Children and Youth. My first comment is actually serious. It's interesting that in the room we talk about youth being youth, and we talk about older people as specialists. Youth are specialists. And if you look at the evidence from tsunami, from Hurricane Katrina, from all the horrific accidents that have happened in the world, but from the environment, the first people in to help are young people. And it's very interesting that actually it's the last people we consider in humanitarian terms. My comment is very simple. I think that you can or cannot control hatred speech, but what you can try and mitigate for is the impact of it. And one of the ways of the impact is exactly as just heard, is about the human connection. And I've just come from a session where we looked at empathy education, about humanitarian education. These are the ingredients in the Irish stew, if I can use that term, to counteract what is hatred. We have to look beyond technology. It's about humanity. It is not about, ultimately, it is about people and nothing else.
Hello? Hello?
Je pense c'est mon
Hola? Okay, so I think I was... Okay, yeah. So, Maria Jose from Bolivia, digital sociologist and researcher. I think we are focusing a lot on taking censorship and putting down videos and so on as a preventive measure, and this is not a preventive measure. This is a countering violent extremism measure, and we should focus in more preventing things like education and so on. And just answering to the distinguished mister there that was saying that if we want to counter hate speech, it's not about just online hate speech, but it's about hate speech in general that exists before the new social media is on the table. But I think that with social media, what we are doing is broadcasting so fast and so transplanetary that it has more power to change mindsets more quickly. So it has to be taken as an isolated issue also.
Anjan?
Well, good day all. Mariam Bahani, criminologist, sociologist. I think that, well, from what I've been able to see from the youths who were able to, use the internet in their transformation process, I would say that for the images, the words, the sounds, to make sense for this person, for them to be able to be impregnated by the video. For example, if we take the video, this video has to have an impact on them. There needs to be a meaning. Some youngsters will go on the website regularly and will simply not connect with them. So even though you want to control all the information that will be on the internet, which is, according to me, not possible, I don't believe it's possible, And even if it was possible, I'm not sure that it would be very healthy to end up in a society where we try to control everything. Well, actually, there's a dark web. You don't even need to go in the ordinary web. There's a dark web. It's very much used. All this to say that we have to go to the source of the problem, i.e., ask ourselves, why does a youngster need, because it's a need to see at some point in time in their lives these videos. It comes and resonates with them. I'll give you an example quickly. I met ex-jihadists from Bosnia. They didn't have internet like we have now. Why some of them went to Bosnia is a simple report on the TV on the Sarajevo graveyards. But this brought them back to an identity situation of their childhood. So we can go very deep with this. It means that we have to work at the source of the problem and not just focus on the superficiality of the internet and the pictures, because pictures say something to these youngsters. Good day, I'm Miriam and I'm a student currently. What we should need to focus on is that we talk about hate, but there are two types of hate. The hate which comes from ignorance and hatred which comes from persons who are supposed to be educated and who are supposed to educate others, amongst others. In the internet, we don't just see comments that are hateful coming from people who perhaps don't know the topic on which they're talking about, but the media, amongst others, who can allow themselves to write articles where they stigmatize certain communities. Well, actually, they're singled out as being all, well, everybody ends up in the same community. There are no differences. So the youngster who's on the internet and who reads these articles and who feels rejected, but these are people who are supposed to be educated. So it's this form of hatred that we have to remove. It's that of the people who stigmatize youngsters, but who are not supposed to because they have an education and they went to university and they have diplomas. So it's this type of hatred that we should control and not the comments, because comments, there will always be comments, whether it's in the street or on the internet. It would be impossible to say to somebody you can't give comments, hateful comments concerning another person. It would be removing freedom of expression, and that we can't do it actually. Just a point, there is a reflection we could have, is that we say we don't want to live in a world that's ultra-regulated, but, for example, in the facilities, in the schools, we're careful for them to avoid having hateful speech. We make sure that a child is not intimidated by his friends, is not subject to discrimination, but we have the impression that now we're talking about the internet as a different environment in which we should not apply the same rules that we have in society. I find this important, and the question that comes after this is education. How could we, from the educational point of view, it was a Twitter question actually, yes indeed, to make sure that we'd involve youngsters, we'd involve people in this critical mind concerning hateful messages on a daily basis, and how do we connect both, not just hateful messages on the internet.
Start my timer. Quick points. Number one, you have to have some regulation. No one is saying no regulation. In everywhere, everything we do, even if we breathe too fast, we will pass out. So there has to be some regulations. We don't allow pedophiles to spread their message, right? So it has to be some line drawn. Number two, I think, I have spent time online with ISIS foreign fighters. I talked out of ISIS, one female from the US, she was going to be a jihadi bride. The number 2 English ISIS account, I stopped him. He goes against ISIS now. One-on-one communications. And last point, they spend day in and day out with their hateful messages, destructive messages. If we spent half the time that they spend, we could do twice as much.
Yeah, good point. Good point, like that. Demoiselle, juste là-bas.
Lady over there. Good day, I'm Bianca Marcelin. I'm the Collège Maisonneuve, and also from the delegation of the Stop Hate movement. Now, concerning the question, how can we improve education? I gave a very simple example. When I went into secondary 4 or 5, there was a conference by somebody who had been bullied following a video they had put on YouTube or Facebook, whatever, I can't remember, and the person did not have the consent of publishing this video. The conference was very interesting because this showed the impact, you could see the direct impact of how hateful messages can disrupt somebody's life. And several of my friends and myself, we understood following this conference that legally there are consequences to the use of internet. For example, post pictures without somebody's consent. There are legal consequences to this. And I think that there's no education done at a high school level anyway, like the legal responsibility of the use of internet. It's ridiculous, but following this, each time I posted a question or posted a picture on Facebook, I would ask my friend, does this bother you? This picture, is it okay? Do you feel uncomfortable if I post this picture? And I think that when everybody will understand that legally the use of the internet is not freedom for all, freedom for anybody, because I'll conclude by saying a sentence which is very important for me. Freedom of everybody stops where other people's freedom begin, which means that for me, the freedom of expression cannot say anything. We have to understand this sentence. Thank you. Thank you very much to you. We'll go to the lady. Also, the question is education. We talk about education, and there are no courses on the use of internet in school, right? Unfortunately, yes. Good day, everybody. I'm Mustafa. I'm involved in education in the school board for many years. I just want to say that the finality is not to find a guilty person. Nobody will really send a legal advice to a computer or a server. That's not how we work. And if we're there to think, it's not to counter a discourse with another discourse. We won't stay in discourses. It's a debate a dialogue of deaf people. The reality, and I would say through also not only the research I've read, but that I've done myself, there are focus groups and groups of families with youth that are involved in this issue. Internet is a means to gather a certain number of things in life's experience that they throw in their face simply, and they propose a certain alternative to counter the phenomenon going towards injustice, going towards problems of living together that are true. These youngsters, for example, they have a life's experience in a family. Justice is in the family. When a youngster comes home and he finds a father in a vegetable market, that will increase radicalization. Thank you.
I think that education about the internet and all the issues is not useful. We have to take into account radicalization for Islam, but as well as that for the media or the extreme white ring. Those ones are easier to accept compared to those that happen in economic spheres. In fact, what happens on the government level, there's a radicalization of government forces that is becoming more and more common. So I think that as long as all of this radicalization is not treated equally, then our work will be inefficient. Thank you. Stéphane, did you want to take another question? No. Go ahead.
Already laws that regulate content on the internet, and for example, the example of pedophiles is really good. So if we want to change these laws, fine, we can discuss about it. But then I would be cautious about censoring the internet, simply because we need radical ideas, and I think they are necessary to our society. Sometimes we might all agree that Daesh ideas are bad, and they are bad for our society. But some radical ideas are actually good. I mean, when women argued for their right to vote, that was considered extremist. That was an extremely radical idea, and it offended people. Yet we needed to discuss about it, and now we all can vote. So thank God for radical ideas, and I think we shouldn't suppress them. We need to discuss them. Some are bad, some are good.
I would like to bounce off what was said earlier. Should we react differently to the approach of internet or online in the schools? Yes, in the schools, we get the impression that a lot of things are allowed online, but as a French person, I think that we should also ask ourselves about our intercultural approach, especially the secularization approach in schools. I think that in France, the secularization approach is too repressive. And in the end, people experience their religion in the cultural sense. I know a lot of people who could have gone into public schools, but they found themselves in religious private schools. And so I think that we also have to change that approach in the schools. and that's something that's offline, and we need to opt more for education. Oh, you wear a kippah or a veil? Explain why. Explain to me why. So there you have. That's my answer. A question from Twitter. What can we do to inform young people and help them to be more clear-sighted young people in our current world? And how can we bring together these two universes, the real one that we live every day and the virtual one, where sometimes we get the impression that we're disconnected from reality? So how can we help young people in this education? And can school play a role in this? Yes, would you like to answer? André Blondin, for the anti-hate movement. So the question that was asked has to do with secularization and putting human rights at the forefront of our school programs. Sometimes we might believe that the virtual world is different from the real world. However, it is just an extension of the real world. Human rights, as they are respected in everyday life, well, we should take concrete measures so that these rights also be respected online. Why is hate speech not as common in our everyday life as it is in the virtual world? There are a lot of websites that have to do with privacy rights and human rights, but at the basis there is a problem of education, of ignorance, a problem of people not being aware enough of the fundamental rights. And the law departments in schools should be teaching students this. Young people, right from a very young age, including teenagers, should be aware of their fundamental rights. We think that's where it starts. Thank you. Ananta? I'll bring him a microphone.
A question. I would like to see the reaction from the crowd between two groups, those below 35 and those above 35. The question is, should we have a dialogue with extremist groups? In this case, let's say the extreme ISIS. Should we have a dialogue where, in fact, we could have invited actual extremists, no due respect to the past, but actually to in this particular conference, or it's not an option? So those below 35, those who say we should have a dialogue, I'd like to see a show of hands. And those above 35. Interesting. That's just for my research. Thank you.
We had a youth right here that wanted to say, we'll go to a youth and then to an adult.
Bonjour, je m'appelle Rim, je travaille.
Hello, my name is Rim. I work in Montreal. I work in for a school board, and I would like to speak to that debate on services in high school, because we have a college where young people have access to information on citizenship information. At high school, there is a program implemented through the educational services program. Spiritual and facilitators are there to work on citizenship projects, and they deal with many topics, including radicalization, but also identity. We focus on living together a lot and inclusion. So there are programs that have been built on that at the secondary school level. And we're trying to do the same thing. Well, in fact, we're trying to promote it because it's not a service that's very well known in the province. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mobin. You wanted to come back to that topic. It's true, living together, that's something we find, we get that impression less online, the living together idea. You wanted to conclude?
Yeah, I just piggyback off of what the brother was saying about perhaps what schools need is a mandatory course on digital literacy. Because, not so much because of the good feelings messaging, but because students are beginning to learn in a different way. So they need to be taught how to learn properly. This is what school is supposed to do from the beginning. So just that one point. And just a second point on inviting ISIS to the conference. You know, at the end of the day, most people don't want to be terrorists because it doesn't work. And for those who do want to be terrorists or think they might want to be terrorists, you have to show them and engage them why it doesn't work. Simple. Daniel and I do this all the time for a living. We have stopped people from killing themselves and killing other people. So for those who say it can't be done, you don't know what you're talking about.
Okay, great, thanks. Go ahead.
Très direct. Attends, on avait...
Very direct. We said we were going to take a question from the lady. Oh, sorry, we'll go here.
Education. I would like to see civic education, and I would like to see empathy education done earlier than high school, at very, very early levels. And I think if you think about what we know about children, they understand structural violence. The fact that we call it structural violence doesn't mean it isn't something that they understand instinctively. They know it's violent if they never have what they see other people have. They understand that. That is something we can start communicating to them about how to deal with and how to express from an incredibly young age. Civic education, it's also not a complicated thing. It's how to speak, how to communicate what you need, how to listen to the needs of other people, and critically, how to hold two needs together when they are conflicting. This is also something that we can teach young people to do, that we can provide them a safe space to learn these skills. And I think we would see enormous positive results as they got older and had to deal with more challenging issues if they had this foundation.
Great. On note des conversations hallucinantes, beaucoup de questions.
A lot of questions, great discussion. The time is starting to run short, so please try to be very short. We're going to try to take 3 last questions. Go ahead, sir. I am a citizen of the world. I would like to continue to say that we can't just limit ourselves to formal education. We also have to recognize informal education. We know the solutions very well. Sport, volunteering. This is what exposes people to diversity.
We have just to accept, tolerate, and celebrate it.
Merci. Monsieur, juste là-bas.
Thank you. The young man over there. Hello, everyone. Fred de la Grandeur. I am a student at the Université de Montréal doing my master's. I am a member of the young group No Hate. I want to talk about ethics. Today, according to our young experiences, well, in fact, we see that young people get mobilized around citizenship action or political reasons. There's a problem with role modeling. For example, we look at our political leaders. This model inspires young people, and then years later, that child might be involved in corruption. There's a problem. They don't have anything to look to. We want to move beyond politics. How do you want young people to participate actively in social life when we have social problems, serious problems? You expect that we're going to spend billions of dollars and cut the budgets for education with austerity measures and such? When we're faced with such a situation, well, there are problems that arise in our social context, and we let the political showbiz overshadow people's real needs. Thank you. We'll go to this lady. Well, I've got Irish roots. I am with the Justice Ministry in Quebec. I just wanted to say that young people are wonderful, youth is wonderful, and we have to work on self-esteem first. Stand up for what they are. That's what's important. Education, yes, but to have a strong self-esteem, well, we've got extraordinary role models here, and the more young people will be confident in themselves and have self-esteem, the better society will be. This is wonderful. There's so much dialogue generated around this. Should we take 5 more minutes? Can we extend a little longer? Okay, 5 extra minutes. I've made the decision. I've decided we're going to take 5 extra minutes. We're going to go with a youth and then the gentleman just over here. Yes, and then Danielle, and then we'll wrap it up. Okay, let's go with the young lady here. You two. Both of you have the mic. I would like to emphasize media. Everybody watches TV and reads the paper, and I think the prejudices that people have on for Christians or Muslims, this all comes from the media because of the negative message. If there's an attack, people think right away that it's probably a Muslim. Am I wrong? I think, unfortunately, that's the truth. So it comes from the media because they are the ones that have that image. And it would seem that they want to stigmatize Muslims. When there's an attack or hate speech online, the hate speech that I saw the most often was on Facebook, from one media source in particular. And they give different explanations. It sounds as if they just want to rally people but not say the truth. When somebody makes an attack but it's not a Muslim, do they say it's a religious thing? No. As soon as they say it's a Muslim, it becomes religious. You see what I'm saying? I find that unfortunate that the media projects that message. Yes, raise awareness among the media. Yes, sir.
You just heard in a different way. So I'm obviously Irish. I grew up when the IRA were at their height. And two things that solved the Northern Ireland process, and it's not fully solved. One was listening to young IRA activists, actually sitting down and listening to them, and it in part led to the peace process. So it was better, if you listen to me, you can understand me. If you can understand me, we can do something about what is going on. So you have to listen. You have 2 ears and 1 mouth. We've got to use our 2 ears. The other thing I would say is just to echo, I do believe in empathy education. I think that it has, if we can educate everybody in empathy, it should be compulsory in schools. We know that we have to learn maths in schools. We should have to learn empathy and digital literacy.
Thank you. Merci beaucoup. On doit malheureusement.
Thank you very much. Unfortunately, well, let me say this is just phenomenal. All of these questions have touched on so many topics. It's very cruel, but we do have to wrap this up. However, if there's one thing that I've heard from all the questions and comments, it's that we should stop putting our heads in the sand and realize that we have to talk to people. Unfortunately, there's something that internet does. It discourages us from talking to people directly. But we see here that as soon as we dare to talk to people, whether they are radicalized or not, I think that that dialogue is extremely important. Whether it's bullying or otherwise, silence is what hurts us most and makes things worse. So we need to have these youth who get more involved, and those who have experiences and expertise, we need to integrate them so that we can offer this education. We want to teach this to young people, but maybe these same young people should teach other young people. I'm sorry, but we really have to stop here. I would really like to sincerely thank you, all the youth here. We heard that we have to let young people talk. We would have liked to let you talk even more. Let's continue this conversation on Twitter, because that's also a discussion tool and a positive one. I took away the message of education and that we have to break down this barrier between school education and the virtual world. I also found it very interesting to hear that we have to open up the debate to people who are on the other side of that barrier. Sometimes we're scared more than anything else, and we realize that when we talk to people, well, that's the best way to bring them closer to us. I think that dialogue will remain a solution, even if sometimes repression is one of the tools used. So I thank all of you. I thank you very, very much. We would have loved to continue, but we have to stop here. Congratulations to all of you. Thank you for your contributions. Bye-bye.